with a karakia, whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, e hi ake ana te atakura, hei tio, hei huka, hei ho hu, tihei Māori ora. Thank you everybody for joining us today for our Lunch and Learn session. Just as a brief introduction, so could you go on to the next slide, Kati? So just as a brief introduction, a reminder of what the Paediatric Society is. This is in every single time we've done the Lunch and Learn, but we support the New Zealand Child and Youth Clinical Network. It's a great organisation to join, whether you're a medical profession, allied health professional. We welcome you all to join us. There's opportunities for meeting with other people with similar interest to yourself, and they provide some opportunity for professional development. You can check us out on that website there. Thank you, Kati. So today's session, we are really lucky to be hearing more about the effect of occupational performance coaching on social participation, health and wellbeing for caregivers of children with neurodisability. This is our introduction session, and the following month we will have a knowledge translation session. Fiona Graham was going to be our presenting here today, but we're very lucky that Laura and Melanie have stepped in to help us in this space. So Fiona Graham was the chief investigator for the Mana study. She's an OT specialising in working with families and children, and she did her PhD with the University of Queensland, and part of her PhD fee developed occupational performance coaching. Dr. Laura Desha, and sorry if I'm saying that incorrectly, is an OT and academic based in Brisbane, and is a research fellow, and who contributed to writing up the study protocols and all of the parts about the research and the ethics part of the study. And Melanie is a Christchurch-based occupational paediatric physio, clinical supervisor, and an OPC trainer, and is also a research fellow at the University of Otago for the Mana study. And we are so lucky that Laura and Melanie have joined us today, because together with Fiona, they're involved with ongoing OPC training and research. So I'll let the two of you take it away.
Lovely, thank you so much, Jane. I'll just get those slides up.
And just as a reminder, this is the knowledge translation session. If you've got any questions as we're going along, you can put them in the chat and we will capture those, but we really welcome you back to the knowledge translation session next month, and Laura and Melanie will be with us again, and it will be much more informal, discussing some of the findings or some of your clinical challenges. So put any questions in the chat today, and maybe if we've got time, there might be time at the end for answering the questions, but hopefully it's that will be the follow-up session.
Jane, sorry, I don't have access to the chat, so I'm not sure if everybody else doesn't either. So otherwise, if you want to just make a note of them, and you can email them through to us, and we'll make sure those are followed up as well.
Can you see the Q&A function? That's the other option.
So we'll just, if either way, you can send a thing direct back to the link that you've got. If you've got access to chat or Q&A, and now we'll just leave it over to Laura and Melanie. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you so much, Jane. Is everyone seeing those slides okay? Let's come up.
Perfectly.
Yep. Wonderful. Well, tēnā koto katoa, ko Ingarani me Inia, te whakapapa ranga mai, engari ko Australia te whenua tupu, ko Brisbane te kāinga, ko Laura Desha toku ingoa. Tēnā tātou katoa. As Jane has introduced us, you've heard that I am an occupational therapist and research fellow, and I'm so thankful for the opportunity to deliver this presentation today with Melanie on FEE's behalf.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Engari te whakaparangi mai, engari ko kirikiri roa te whenua tupu, ko Otutahi tō kāinga. He kai whakaora nangahau, o ko Melanie Scott tōku ingoa, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Yeah, thank you again, Jane, for a warm welcome and the team that supported this to kick off. I've attended a lot of these and it's wonderful to be here with Laura. And I'm an occupational therapist down in Otutahi, Christchurch, and yeah, great to connect today.
Lovely. So we are going to be presenting today the outcomes from the Māori study, which was funded by the Health Research Council and was a randomised controlled trial comparing occupational performance coaching, or OPC as we call it for short, to usual care with a New Zealand paediatric neurodisability population. And that took place between 2020 and 2023 was when we finished collecting data. As most of you know, mana is te reo, meaning personal authority or status, and it was adopted as a name for this study in collaboration with Māori colleagues to reflect the overarching intention of OPC, and that is to enhance mana by centering on what has meaning for caregivers, what elevates their agency, and what nurtures their sense of autonomy over their lives. This whakatauki talks to collaboration and a strengths-based approach. It acknowledges that everybody has something to offer, and by working together, we can all flourish. And we would like to take this opportunity to thank everybody from around the country who contributed to this very large national multi-site study, helping with the pursuit of delivering high-quality, evidence-based allied healthcare for whānau and tamariki. We really appreciate your contributions, and we're pleased to share the study findings.
Occupational performance coaching is a person-centred and relational coaching approach. And for those of you that know about OPC already, then this is hopefully a reinforcement. And for those of you, a new welcome. It's designed for rehab, and it really is about supporting meaningful participation in daily life by helping clients to identify and implement changes that matter most to them. OPC can be delivered by a range of allied health professionals, including occupational therapists, physios, speech therapists, and psychologists. It's really structured around the three interrelated domains as depicted here of connect, structure, and share, where connect focuses on building high trust relationships through empathy, listening, and partnership. And this relational foundation really underpins every encounter that we have with our clients. In structure, the therapists support clients through a highly reflective process to set personally meaningful goals, focusing on a preferred future state using strength and solution-based strategies. In the top domain, through share, therapists draw attention to the client's own knowledge and capabilities, building confidence, agency, and ownership of change. OPC is a distinctly hands-off approach, and therapists avoid persuasion, providing unsolicited advice or standardised assessments, particularly that don't support solution finding. As previously mentioned, it was developed by Fiona Graham as part of her PhD studies at the University of Queensland in 2006, with the support of her supervisors Jenny Ziviani and Anne Kennedy-Barr. OPC has been manualised and has a variety of free resources and a fidelity tool available. Originally, it was created for parents of children with disabilities, but OPC is now used internationally with children, families, and adults across a range of settings and diagnoses, including cerebral palsy, autism, and neurodevelopmental disability. Studies have shown positive impacts on participation, parental self-efficacy, and family outcomes. OPC shares mechanisms with approaches like motivational interviewing, solution-focused therapy, and acceptance and commitment therapy, but stands apart in its grounding in self-determination theory and behaviour change. These foundations support autonomy, competence, and motivation, making change both meaningful and sustainable. Finally, OPC remains deeply rooted in occupational therapy theory, informed by models such as the person-environment occupation model, the PEO model, and the Canadian model of occupational participation.
So the MANA study is one of 6 randomised controlled trials of OPC which have been completed or are ongoing internationally. And randomisation refers to this random allocation of participants to an intervention or comparison group, as many of you will know. It can be applied to either the therapist or who's delivering an intervention or the patients who are receiving it. And in the Māori study, it was the therapists who were randomised to receive OPC training or usual care, which meant that their clients were then effectively randomised to the group of their treating therapist. And while the therapists clearly knew which group they were in, the families remained blind to their therapist's group allocation. And RCTs of OPC are an important progression in research because well-conducted randomisation minimises the risk of bias and gives us more confidence in the study findings about how effective this intervention is. So the Māori study had several elements to it. In addition to the single-blind, two-arm parallel group RCT that we've undertaken, we also have completed or are completing currently a process evaluation examining the RCT outcomes, including Māori and Pacifica caregivers' experiences of OPC. And we're doing an economic evaluation of OPC versus usual care. We have published protocols for the process evaluation and the RCT, and these are both available online with open access. Now, this presentation focuses specifically on the quantitative findings of the RCT, which address the research question, do children with neurodisability and their caregivers have better health and wellbeing after OPC when compared to usual care and when these are delivered in existing service delivery contexts? And are the same outcomes achieved for Māori? So this was a superiority trial examining if OPC is superior to usual care.
So in terms of recruitment and randomisation, therapists were occupational therapists, speech therapists and physios that were a part of our study, working in publicly funded services with children with neurodisability with at least 6 months experience. They were recruited from 18 sites across Aotearoa, including ACC and Ministry of Health funded services, mostly including child development centres. Recruitment ran in 3 waves from 2020 through to 2022, with randomisation by wave and by site. In total, we had 52 therapists who were randomised. 66% of those were occupational therapists, 21% were speech therapists, and 14% were physios, ranging from junior to senior levels. Those allocated to the OPC group completed 16 hours of online training with demonstration, practice and feedback, plus 8 hours of guided self-study. They received the OPC manual and had monthly mentoring, which included individual and group support, and fidelity checks using audio recorded sessions reviewed by the therapist themselves and the OPC trainer. Therapists then delivered either OPC or usual care for all new eligible children. All other aspects of care, including location, frequency and assessments, were left to their clinical judgment, with the exception of the OPC group who were asked to deliver OPC alone. Around half of the therapists recruited families, which you can see here from the number of 52, and then it comes down into the OPC group on the left and the usual care group on the right with those 2 arrows. Around half of the therapists recruited families and contributed session data to the study. Iteration was balanced across groups, so it was unlikely to be related to the allocation in terms of the drop of how many therapists actually uploaded and recruited families. Children were eligible if they had or were waiting a diagnosis of neurodisability-related condition and were aged 2 to 18, and the therapist expected to see them for at least 3 sessions over 16 weeks. Caregivers needed to be the child's primary caregiver. In total, we had 97 families receiving at least 1 session of therapy, but only 58 families received 3 or more sessions. However, therapists only provided session data for a total of 29 families across both groups, with only 20 of these families having received 3 or more therapy sessions during the 2-year data collection period. Demographic analysis showed the groups were well balanced, with no evidence of systematic bias. We used several measures to assess changes in health and well-being. The primary outcome was the Canadian Occupational Performance Measure, or COPM, completed by phone with caregivers by research staff blinded to group allocation. In these extended interviews, caregivers and children, when appropriate, identified everyday activities they wanted, needed, or were expected to do, but weren't yet doing as well as they'd like. Rather than focusing on problems, we worked with families to create future-focused goals grounded in their real-life social contexts. An example of a goal that may have been generated from the COPM was to stay seated at dinner time at home while eating his kai with the family. Caregivers also rated their current performance and satisfaction with each goal on a 1 to 10 scale. These goals were then revisited at follow-up when families re-rated them and confirmed whether the goals had been addressed in therapy. Change in performance scores was the main outcome, with a 2-point change considered clinically meaningful. We also engaged with secondary measures, looking at parent mental health using the DAS-21. We also looked at children's adaptive skills with the PEDI, and where appropriate and where children could participate, we used a children's self-report quality of life through the kids screen. On average, 3 goals were identified by each caregiver in their initial interview with the researchers, and at the end of treatment, caregivers reported that 2 out of 3 of these goals had been addressed by their therapists. The number of sessions scheduled or attended varied significantly between the OPC and usual care groups, with the OPC group attending on average of 2 sessions, while the usual care group attended an average of 3. Rates of non-attendance of scheduled sessions were equal between the groups. The OPC group were more likely to use telehealth or home-based sessions than the usual care group, who were more likely to see families in clinic settings. These findings here on this slide show the nature of therapy that was delivered based on the Occupational Performance Coaching Fidelity Measure, which assesses how closely sessions or the therapy provided aligned with OPC core tenets. Therapists audio recorded their sessions, which were then independently scored by raters, blinded to the group allocation. We used the same fidelity measure for both groups to assess whether OPC was truly a distinct intervention approach from usual care. Just to orientate you, that each vertical line represents 1 therapist, with usual care therapists in blue on the left and OPC trained therapists in red on the right. Those vertical axes show average fidelity scores, and the higher the scores reflect stronger alignment with OPC. So as expected, as you can see on the right, OPC therapists had higher fidelity, with all of their red dots centering at the top there, averaging at about 65%. So that's that solid line that you see running through the centre on the right. While this falls short of the 80% benchmark indicated by the staggered line, it's clearly distinct from the 21% average in the usual care group. There were only 2 OPC therapists that consistently scored above 80%, so that's that top right cluster shown at the far right, and 1 usual care therapist, that's therapist 12, if you can find that number at the bottom axis, occasionally used OPC style approaches, and 1 OPC trained therapist showed very little evidence of training effects, so that's there in the centre pointed out to you. This slide shows average scores, looking specifically at the OPC fidelity measure items for the first therapy session. Again, comparing OPC therapists in the red on the right, predominantly to usual care therapists in blue. For more detailed item descriptors, the OPC fidelity measure is available on the Otago OPC website under our free resources. The top 2 boxes here highlight therapist behaviours encouraged in OPC, reflecting both in therapist actions and client response, really emphasising the partnership-based approach. Both groups demonstrated moderate to high empathy, and clients showed trust in their therapists. However, OPC therapists involved families more in goal setting, focusing on goals meaningful to clients and caregivers. And notably, conversations about envisioning a preferred future where goals are achieved were present in OPC, but absent in usual care. Within OPC sessions, caregivers were also more involved in reflecting on home-based factors affecting goals, and we call those bridges and barriers, and also being actively involved in decisions to plan actions for change. It's hard when I can't control the cursor, but hopefully you can orientate to that. The bottom box shows behaviours discouraged in OPC, and we've reversed those scores so that it just shows what we're wanting to see is these items being absent if it's strongly aligned with OPC. So usual care therapists were more likely to give advice or use persuasion. Hands-on therapy was low in both groups, but more variable in the usual care group. Overall, this slide clearly demonstrates how OPC practice differs from usual care, a pattern that persisted in their follow-up sessions.
We completed intention to treat analysis of the results, finding that there was no difference in the children or the parents' health or wellbeing between the OPC and the usual care groups. So our finding was that OPC was not more effective than usual care. The children in both groups improved to clinically significant levels, on average 2 points on the COPM, both in performance and satisfaction scales. Parental mental health improved slightly, equally for both groups, and the PEDI and KID screen are yet to be analysed. The outcomes were equal for Māori compared to non-Māori, and a range of measures indicated that caregivers were highly satisfied with both usual care and OPC. So let's have a think now about what the implications might be of these findings. Firstly, in the orange box on the slide, OPC training was noted to lead to significant changes in therapy practices, which are in keeping with recommendations for best practice care. For example, as Mel's just said, we saw on the fidelity measure that OPC trained therapists were more likely to engage intentionally in goal setting. So therefore, in training and delivery, the training and delivery of OPC remain worthwhile endeavours on the basis of this study. Secondly, in the green, despite using the framework of an RCT and our very best attempts to control the delivery of OPC, therapists weren't applying OPC in perfect laboratory-style conditions and circumstances. Instead, they were dealing with real-world situations, including the stresses from COVID-19, 2 cyclones during the trial, and some substantial changes to service delivery in a few settings as well. And in this complex environment, OPC has been found in the study to be equivalent to usual care in its overall impact on caregivers and children's health and wellbeing and social participation. Thirdly, in these real-world circumstances, it was hard for therapists to consistently achieve a high level of fidelity in implementing OPC as it was intended to be delivered, and this is a priority area for research and development. Our ongoing process evaluation is exploring the factors which may have promoted or impeded high fidelity implementation of OPC. We asked our OPC trained therapist questions about their experiences of learning and implementing OPC, and our findings have already led to tailoring and enhancement of our training and post-training support mechanisms that can be put in place in the workplace. And some examples of the changes to training are things like enhancements to clarity in the training with more case examples, more opportunities for reflection and practice, and an extended focus on goal setting, collaborative performance analysis are some other examples. Some of the findings regarding the dose or amount of therapy were unexpected, and these are in blue on the slide. The very low dose of therapy reportedly offered by both the OPC and the usual care groups is really noteworthy, and it's unclear if this is a reflection of lost data or extremely low levels of intervention being offered to most families during the study period. We didn't find any statistically significant relationships between higher dose of therapy and outcomes for either of the groups. And our study did have adequate power, it was big enough, to detect a difference if there had been one. Compared with usual care, the OPC therapists achieved the same outcomes in less sessions and with greater use of telehealth. So this has positive economic ramifications, and because of the potential for telehealth to cut down on travel and CO2 emissions, we can also consider that OPC delivered this way possibly has potential environmental impact as well. Interestingly, we found that there were improvements in COPM scores in both the usual care and the OPC groups, even when very few therapy sessions were provided. It's possible that having an extended CIPM interview with an enthusiastic researcher who helped the caregiver to frame their current problems as future-orientated goal statements also had an effect on goal achievement, regardless of whether the therapist was following OPC or usual care. This type of conversation is very much in alignment with the goal-setting process within OPC, where clients are encouraged to imagine a situation to envision when a problem has been resolved. And therefore, both of the groups received similar OPC-like input at the beginning from that interview. Research does suggest that goal setting in and of itself can have positive effects. And so our study design, particularly our approach to identifying the family's goals, may have reduced the difference between the two groups, contributing to the finding that usual care has similar outcomes to OPC. Now, all of these findings in blue on the screen there about dose suggest that the amount and the delivery of therapy warrant further study, both of them. And they raise the question of what dose of OPC at what level of fidelity is needed for change. Finally, we were interested in caregivers' positive responses to usual care when that was typically characterised by therapists presenting as experts with fairly low collaboration in their sessions. This finding is at odds with the international literature on what parents tend to prefer from therapists. And we wondered if the social disruption of COVID and the extreme weather events might have produced a climate of uncertainty and complexity for families during this data collection period. And perhaps families were therefore more appreciative of a directive therapy style during this time and had lower expectations of engagement in therapy. Prior research also indicates that families can find OPC rewarding but effortful, and during COVID, families might have found themselves less able to invest the effort that was required from OPC. So we are currently finalising our process evaluation, which is a close examination of the RCT findings, what happened specifically for the OPC trained therapists. We're interested to find out when OPC worked for them or didn't work, for whom it worked and under what circumstances. And this is a mixed method process of analysis that we're currently engaged in. The qualitative data includes in-depth interviews with therapists who are trained in OPC, interviews with Māori and Pacifica caregivers who received it, and interviews and exploration of the trainer's experience. That's the people who supported therapists in learning and delivering OPC. And this exploration will help us to understand if the findings of non-superiority between the OPC group and the usual care relate more to the way that OPC was implemented in the study or OPC itself. So the process evaluation is going to provide us with guidance on how OPC or the implementation of OPC can be modified to enhance outcomes for clients. That is the way that therapists are trained, perhaps, or the way that they're supported in the workplace after initial training. And as we mentioned earlier in this presentation, it is our hope that these findings will support you, this paediatric allied health workforce, to make decisions about therapy approaches so that we can deliver high quality, impactful, evidence-based care to whānau and tamariki. And we're curious if you've got questions.
What I would say is that like we're really right up to the line of 12:30. Yeah, we're right up to the line of 12:30, and often in our lunch and learn sessions we ask you guys as presenters to put in 2 or 3 questions back to us that you would like us to think about before we come back to our next knowledge translation session. And that was a real whistle-stop tour of a very complex RCT. And I guess my biggest thing that I'm wondering about all of the people that have joined us today is the amazing research, a lot of research language and terminology, and the processes in your steps of the RCT and the quant data and the qual data and all of that kind of thing. And my question is, I mean, I don't know maybe some people can quickly put some things in the chat if they have, but I guess my big thing is, here's this amazing research, and the gap between what this was about was the supporting people, clinicians, to transfer research into clinical practice. Like it was an actual strategy to here's the research, here's the training, compare it, and to implement into clinical practice, because that's one of the hardest things as clinicians that you are learning. I mean, I wonder we could even take the thing off the screen so other people's faces that are there, but I've got loads of things that I wrote down for me. I don't want to take it over, but maybe there's something that we could, as a group, so that we can come back. I don't know, Kati, can you, I see you've got the next session there. Well, I'm seeing your whole screen, but yes, there's, so the next session is knowledge translation on the effect of OPC on social participation, health and wellbeing for caregivers of children with neurodisability. That is OPC, but we are coming back as a group, and I just wonder if there was something that you would like to say to us as a group that we could think about, that you would like from us to be asking questions, or us as a group here could be saying, yeah, and so we've got quickly here, did the OPC trained therapists use the fidelity measure? I think the fidelity measure was just measuring them. That was part of your trial as measuring them when you were watched their videos again. And Anya has said, great research question and interesting findings. I just think it'd be really great if we had something to go away and think of, that we could come back and have breakout sessions or stuff to be thinking of. Anyway,
I'm just going. We did generate those, so I'm just going to pop them into
I was going to say they might need some time. Yeah.
Thanks,
we did generate those, so I've popped those just now for you to consider.
Did you put them in the queue?
Answer. So I've just asked, what are your top 3 takeaways from today's presentation? Now that could be across any piece of what resonates with you. How does this presentation influence your thoughts about learning OPC or using OPC locally with your clients? Maybe possible challenges versus benefits. So monitoring of fidelity, the extent to which an intervention is delivered as intended, has important implications for the quality of service provision and interpretation of research findings. What are your thoughts on measurement of fidelity and your experiences, and what supported you if you've been in that experience before? And of course, we're always interested in what would support you clinically to engage in OPC, particularly if you've got lived experience of using OPC in practice already.
No, and those are really great questions, and I think that's where I was coming from with the
you just needed me to have that
fidelity monitor as well. Yeah, like how do you know you're actually doing it, and in terms of using it, like you're saying, that self-reflection after you've done the session, am I actually doing that as well? So no, they're great
really
questions.
Powerful.
So maybe, Kati, that those questions, I'm sure you've probably already done it, cut and paste them and then send that out as a follow-up from today's one, not just wait before the next one. Like, could it be a follow-up from today to all the people that we normally email, so that okay.
That probably doesn't make sense, because that would be 400 people, and which part haven't attended the session.
Okay, everyone.
Quickly cut and paste that.
Everybody
that's on screen now.
And please come back in a month and join us for the discussion as well, because there's lots of really good points there. Yeah.
And maybe some of the questions can be, most of us as clinicians is some of the language in the research. You're like, what did that mean? Like, I want to know that that's got evidence behind it. So not to be like freaked out by like all the research jargon, but like, what does this mean about implementing this, changing practice? Yes, you can add something to your kitty, you can add another thing. Sometimes people's kitties get very full, and if something comes in, something's got to go out. And like anything with behaviour change for families or for ourselves, it's about practice and doing something multiple times And like Donna was saying, the fidelity measure, if you haven't got a fidelity measure to sense check yourself, where's your community around you to be sense checking? And I think that is part of what you just said about the changes that have already happened from the feedback from people is that did the OPC training, that you're changing the way that you're delivering some of the training. And I wonder if maybe some of the people here have already done OPC training, and what's the chance of there being not just the bog standard, I didn't mean like that, but the initial OPC training versus a refresher training, like that might be something that's that would be useful.
Be happy to speak to the tiers of training that we've evolved and where that might fit in for those where you might fit in now with our training tiers, depending on whether you've had our introduction to OPC course already under your belt or whether you're just beginning your journey. If that's something that you're interested in, we can talk to that for sure.
And just so you know, Leah's put in a thing about like guidance about accessing OPC training, so maybe like have that as part of your next presentation would be helpful. Yeah,
absolutely.
This has been great.
Trouble.
Does anybody have any other things? Because any other questions I'd like to post? I don't mean to rush people on, but we have. Sorry, I'm just trying to find a.
And again, you can always email them through to Kati as well. So Jane, Kati, and I will get together and check before our next session and make sure that we've got those as well.
Lovely.
Yep,
Look forward to joining you for the knowledge translation session.
Yeah, those questions you've asked, Donna, and others, we can directly respond to those at that next time. That'll be wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm just going to close with karakia so that other people that want to leave can leave. I see your hand up, Elizabeth, but if we could just close with a karakia to formally close our little learning today. Unahia, unahia, unahia ki te uru tapanui. Kia wātia, kia mama, te nāko, te tinana, te wairua I te ara tangata. Koia rā e rongo, whakairea aki ki runga. Kia tina, huie taikie. Thank you, everyone. Thanks. We'll see you all.